Just killed a man outside my house, dead.
This was the scene the night of February 20th in the London neighborhood of Camden. Below is the body of Sadiq Adan Muhammad, a 20-year-old slashed to death. Mark Hall was there and filmed these clips. It's his voice you hear on the video.
And the guy was lying on the floor, and although like a river was coming out of him. People were shouting and screaming, "Throw me some towels, throw me some..." So I just saw everything off the balcony and just kind of watched from there in horror, really.
Muhammad was not the only one murdered in the area that day. Just hours earlier, 17-year-old Abdikarim Hassan was found fatally wounded in a nearby street. The murder of these two young men, both Somali, are part of a growing epidemic of violence. Since February 2018, London's murder rate has overtaken that of New York City's, according to London and New York police. Crimes committed with a knife, the most common weapon used, have risen by a staggering 21% in the 12 months to September 2017, according to government figures. The Somali community here in Camden is still reeling, but this isn't an issue of one specific community or one specific part of the city. The violence has been described as a virus, and the fear is it's going to get worse before it gets better. Former Metropolitan Police Superintendent Leroy Logan says the rise has been fueled by poor policing and shrinking budgets.
If they believe that the police service is an occupying force and not a service, then young people in particular are not going to deal with them. And so if they have any differences, they use street justice instead of the justice system. They believe that the police over-policing them and under-protecting them. They don't feel a trust and confidence.
Last month, an ad campaign was launched by the Home Office to deter people from carrying knives. And London's Met Police released a statement on the latest figures saying one murder is one too many, and we are working hard with our partners to understand the increase and what we can all do to prevent these tragedies from happening in the first place. Hall was moved to action by the horror he witnessed that night. He and other local residents have founded a community outreach charity.
This is why we're trying to do something here to give people a little bit of hope as well, you know, because at the end of the day, we'll never recover, I don't think, from what we saw, but I think we're trying to do our best to make a change somehow, you know.
London is struggling to stem the bloodshed and save the beating heart of the city, its youth.
What I think is most striking here is that investors are so desperate to get to safety that they are rushing into these safe havens no matter the price, right? We're seeing this rush into government bonds, even though yields have basically vanished and in some cases are even negative. They are buying gold, even though gold has now topped $1,500 an ounce for the first time since 2013. And yes, even cryptocurrency, right? Bitcoin is getting some love even at these levels above $11,000. And so I think all of this speaks to this underlying concern that the escalation of the trade war on top of the already existing slowdown in the global economy will cause a either severe slowdown or even a recession. All of that is really at play. Now, what I'm most struck by, though, is the bond market, because, you know, the 10-year actually for one moment this morning did go below 1.6% on the yield. That means that the 10-year yield has basically been cut in half just since last November. It's been a stunning move, and I think that really the number of the day is 15 trillion, because that's how much negative yielding debt there is around the world. When you think about that, no wonder why people are piling into gold.
This president has fanned the flames of white supremacy in this nation. His low energy, vacant-eyed mouthing of the words written for him, condemning white supremacists this week, I don't believe fooled anyone at home or abroad. His energetic embrace, the energetic embrace of this president by the darkest hearts and most hate-filled minds in this country say it all. When the white nationalist Richard Spencer celebrated Trump's election by declaring, "Hail Trump," at an alt-right conference where the Nazi salute was being used. In Charlottesville, David Duke, the former leader of the KKK, said this is why we voted for Donald Trump, because he said he's going to take back the country. After Trump tweeted his "Go Back" screed, a leading Nazi website, neo-Nazi website, said, "This is the kind of nationalism we elected him for." He knows it. He saw it. And on 8chan, a haven for radicalism on the internet, where a declaration of hate linked to El Paso shooter was posted, one commentator wrote that Trump is helping normalize the most extreme radical sentiments because his perceived authority carries so much weight. We have a problem with this rising tide of supremacy, white supremacy in America. And we have a president who encourages and emboldens it. We're living through a rare moment in this nation's history where our president isn't up to the moment, where our president lacks the moral authority to lead, where our president has more in common with George Wallace than he does with George Washington. You know, we are almost 330 million Americans who have to do what our president can't. Stand together. Stand against hate.
A CNN exclusive revealing an inside look at the Trump administration and its commitment to combating white supremacy and struggles about that. Multiple current and former senior Trump administration officials and others close to the administration tell me that for more than a year, White House officials rebuffed their colleagues at the Department of Homeland Security who are trying to include domestic terror threats, such as those from white supremacists, as a greater priority, one specifically spelled out in the National Counterterrorism Strategy that was issued last November. A senior source telling me, quote, Homeland Security officials battled the White House for more than a year to get them to focus more on domestic terrorism. The White House wanted to focus only on the jihadist threat, which, while serious, ignored the reality that racial supremacist violence was rising fast here at home. They had major ideological blinders on, unquote. The National Counterterrorism Strategy, which I said was issued last fall, and as a source involved in the discussions put it to me, quote, ultimately the White House just added one paragraph about domestic terrorism as a throwaway line. It makes no mention specifically of white supremacists. A current senior Trump administration official told me that when it comes to combating the threat of domestic terrorism, Homeland Security is, quote, behind the curve because of lack of support from the White House. Recall back in March, President Trump was asked directly about the threat of white supremacy and white nationalism after 51 innocent Muslims were murdered in that deadly mosque attack in New Zealand.
You see today white nationalism as a rising threat around the world. I don't really. I think it's a small group of people that have very, very serious problems.
Now, why the White House pushed back so much against people at the Department of Homeland Security is a matter of some debate. A former senior administration official noted that except when he seems to be forced to do so, as happened Monday when the president condemned white supremacy, President Trump generally seems to be reluctant to do so. The senior source telling me that overlaying the entire debate, the back and forth between the White House and DHS, was the belief among White House officials that criticizing white supremacist domestic terrorists would be an issue, potentially for the president. Quote, you know it will trigger the boss. Just minutes ago, a senior administration official told me, quote, this administration's national strategy for counterterrorism was the first to ever include domestic terrorism. This issue continues to be a priority for this administration, and the National Security Council has launched an interagency process focused on combating domestic terrorism in support of the president's counterterrorism strategy.